curse of the boogeyman. Ellison Oswalt, a true crime writer, moved his family wife Tracy, daughter Ashley, and son Trevor into a new house in the suburbs, hoping for a fresh start. Unbeknownst to his family, Ellison chose the house because it was the site of a horrific unsolved murder that he intended to use as the basis for his next book. From the moment they arrived, a heavy, unsettling feeling seemed to hang over the property. While exploring the attic, Ellison found a dusty box labeled Home Movies. Inside were several reels of Super 8 film and an old projector. Intrigued, Ellison took the box downstairs, set up the projector, and began to watch the films. Each reel started innocuously enough, but quickly turned into a horrifying depiction of families being brutally murdered. One name kept appearing in the films: Mr. Boogie. As Ellison continued to watch the films late into the night, strange things began to happen. He heard faint whispers and footsteps echoing through the house. Shadowy figures appeared in the corners of his vision, only to vanish when he turned to look. The more he watched, the more he felt the presence of something malevolent watching him. Determined to uncover the truth, Ellison delved deeper into the history of the murders. He discovered that each family had lived in the same house before being killed, and that one child from each family had disappeared without a trace. The connections between the murders and the appearance of Mr. Boogie became clear. Ellison realized that the entity was not just a figment of his imagination, but a real and deadly threat. Ellison's daughter Ashley began to exhibit strange behavior. She drew disturbing images of Mr. Boogie on her bedroom walls and spoke of him as if he were a friend. Her eyes often appeared distant, as if she were in a trance. Ellison and Tracy were alarmed by her behavior, but Ellison's obsession with the case kept him from seeing the danger his family was in. As Ellison watched the films again, he noticed hidden symbols and messages that seemed to be calling out to Mr. Boogie. He frantically flipped through each reel, piecing together a dark and horrifying puzzle. The oppressive dark energy in the house grew stronger, and Ellison felt the malevolent presence closing in on him and his family. A local deputy, who Ellison nicknamed Deputy So-and-so, visited the house to warn him about the curse associated with Mr. Boogie. He revealed that each family who lived in the house met a gruesome end, and that the pattern stretched back decades. The deputy urged Ellison to leave the house and protect his family, but Ellison's obsession with solving the case kept him from heeding the warning. Ellison's son Trevor began to sleepwalk, drawn to the attic where the films were stored. His eyes were glazed over, and he seemed to be in a trance. Ellison found him one night standing in front of the projector, staring blankly at the flickering images. The entity was gaining control over the children, using them as conduits for its malevolent plans. Realizing the danger, Ellison decided to destroy the films and the projector. As he attempted to burn them, the house began to shake violently. Shadows coalesced into the form of Mr. Boogie, who loomed menacingly over Ellison. The entity's power was overwhelming, and it seemed as if Ellison's efforts were in vain. The spirit of Mr. Boogie was intent on claiming another family. In a last-ditch effort to save his family, Ellison gathered Tracy, Ashley, and Trevor, and they fled the house in the dead of night. As they drove away, the house loomed dark and ominous behind them, as if watching them go. They left everything behind, determined to start anew and put the horrors of Mr. Boogie behind them. But as they drove into the distance, Ellison couldn't shake the feeling that the curse was far from over, and that Mr. Boogie would continue to haunt them. The Rise of the Antichrist. On a stormy night in 1966, Catherine Thorne gave birth to a baby boy in an old Gothic hospital. Unbeknownst to her, her husband Robert had been told their child was stillborn. In his grief, he was persuaded by Father Spoleto to adopt an orphaned infant born the same night. As lightning struck and thunder roared, the baby was christened Damien, marking the beginning of an ancient prophecy. As Damien grew, strange and unsettling events began to occur. His nanny, a woman with an eerie smile and glinting eyes, seemed particularly devoted to him. During Damien's 5th birthday party, she committed a shocking act, hanging herself from the roof and proclaiming her devotion to Damien before the horrified guests. The incident was only the beginning of a series of dark omens surrounding the boy. Following the tragic death of Damien's first nanny, Mrs. Baylock arrived unannounced at the Thorne residence, claiming to be sent by the agency. With a cold, calculating gaze and a large black dog by her side, she quickly took control of Damien's care. Catherine felt increasingly uneasy around her, sensing a malevolent presence. Mrs. Baylock's influence over Damien grew stronger, deepening the darkness within the household. Robert Thorne, plagued by the growing number of sinister incidents, sought answers. He met Keith Jennings, a photographer who had captured strange anomalies in his photos, showing dark shadows and lines pointing towards death. Together they investigated Damien's origins, discovering chilling connections to an ancient prophecy and the rise of the Antichrist. The deeper they delved, the more they realized the extent of the evil they were facing. Their investigation led them to an old cemetery in Italy, where they uncovered the graves of Damien's biological mother, a jackal, and a murdered infant. The shocking discovery confirmed their worst fears. Damien was not human. A series of ancient texts and clues revealed that Damien was the Antichrist, destined to bring about the end of the world. Time was running out, and Robert knew he had to act to save humanity. Catherine, increasingly tormented by visions and nightmares, suffered a tragic accident orchestrated by Mrs. Baylock, resulting in a fall from a high hospital window. As she lay in critical condition, Robert's desperation grew. He confronted Mrs. Baylock, but her malevolent power was overwhelming. The dark forces surrounding Damien were growing stronger, and Robert's resolve was tested to its limits. Robert and Keith discovered a set of ancient daggers, the only weapons capable of killing the Antichrist. The daggers were inscribed with dark symbols and carried a heavy burden. Robert's determination to save his wife and the world was matched only by his fear of what he must do. He knew that killing Damien, despite his love for the boy, was the only way to stop the prophecy. On a dark, stormy night, Robert took Damien to a church, the place where the ancient text decreed the Antichrist must be killed. As lightning flashed and thunder roared, Robert hesitated, torn between his love for Damien and his duty to humanity. Damien's eerie calmness only added to the tension. At the last moment, Mrs. Baylock appeared, determined to protect Damien at all costs, leading to a fierce and desperate struggle. Bloodied and exhausted from his battle with Mrs. Baylock, Robert held the dagger over Damien's heart. Tears streamed down his face as he prepared to strike, knowing that his actions would end the life of the boy he had raised as his own. The weight of his decision bore down on him, and with a final heart-wrenching cry, he plunged the dagger into Damien's heart. The storm outside seemed to reflect his agony. As the storm subsided, Robert stood alone in the church, the weight of his actions heavy on his shoulders. The sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over him. The ancient prophecy had been averted, but the cost was immense. Robert knew that he had saved humanity, but at the price of his family and his own peace of mind. The church stood as a testament to his sacrifice, and the world moved on, unaware of the darkness that had been averted. The House of the Devil. Samantha Hughes, a struggling college student, was desperate for money to pay her rent. While flipping through a local newspaper, she came across an ad for a babysitting job. The pay was unusually high, and despite her roommate Megan's reservations, Samantha decided to take the job. She called the number and arranged to meet the Ullman family at their secluded Victorian mansion. Samantha arrived at the Ullman mansion just as the sun was setting. The house was a large, ominous Victorian structure, surrounded by overgrown trees and an eerie silence. Mr. Ullman, a tall and imposing man, greeted her at the door. He explained that there was no child to babysit, but his elderly mother needed someone to keep an eye on her for the night. Despite feeling uneasy, Samantha agreed to stay, lured by the generous payment. Once the Ullmans left, Samantha settled into the dimly lit living room. The house was filled with strange noises, the creaking of floorboards, the howling wind, and the incessant ticking of a grandfather clock. She tried to relax, but the unsettling atmosphere made it difficult. As she explored the house, she found disturbing family portraits and strange symbols etched into the walls. While exploring the attic, Samantha found a locked door. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she managed to pry it open. Inside, she discovered a room filled with occult paraphernalia, candles, books on dark rituals, and a large pentagram drawn on the floor. The air was thick with dust, and a cold draft chilled her to the bone. She hurriedly closed the door, her heart pounding with fear. Frightened by her discovery, Samantha called Megan to explain what she had found. Her voice trembled as she described the eerie symbols and the occult items in the attic. Megan, concerned for her friend's safety, offered to come over and pick her up. Samantha, however, decided to stay, reasoning that the Ullmans would be back soon and she needed the money. Megan reluctantly agreed to check on her later. As the night wore on, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The shadows in the house seemed to move on their own, and she kept hearing faint whispers and footsteps. She tried to distract herself by turning on the TV, but the feeling of an unseen presence grew stronger. Her unease turned into dread when she realized that she wasn't alone in the house. Driven by a sudden burst of courage, Samantha decided to confront whatever was haunting her. She followed the eerie noises to a hidden room where she found the Ullmans' so-called mother. The figure was grotesque and malevolent, her eyes glowing with a sinister light. Samantha's scream echoed through the house as the entity lunged at her, but she managed to escape, slamming the door behind her. Desperate to find a way out, Samantha stumbled into the basement. There, she discovered an altar and a circle of hooded figures chanting in an ancient guttural language. The air was thick with dark energy, and Samantha realized that she had walked into the middle of a sinister ritual. She recognized Mr. Ullman among the figures, confirming her worst fears. Determined to survive, Samantha fought off the hooded figures with whatever she could find: candlesticks, chairs, and even her own fists. Her fear fueled her strength, and she managed to break free from the circle. She ran through the house, pursued by the cultists, her heart pounding with terror. Each step felt like a battle for her life. Samantha finally found an exit and fled the mansion, running through the forest with the cultists close behind. The moonlight guided her path as she stumbled over roots and rocks, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear the chants growing fainter, but the fear of being caught spurred her on. She didn't stop until she reached the road, where Megan was waiting in her car, her face a mix of relief and terror. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Horror Stories to Fall Asleep and hit the bell icon to never miss a new fright. Now, let's dive into 3 disturbing true horror stories. Remember, in the world of horror stories to fall asleep, fear is just the beginning.